Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Thursday morning at our weekly morning meeting with Groundwork Ohio. Really appreciate everybody being here today. I am very excited to invite one of our board members, the Reverend John Jones, who leads Hope Toledo, to share an update with us today on their programming here in a minute. Before we kick off, I'll just share a quick legislative update. Here at the State House this week, we provided testimony. I know a lot of folks on our call did too, as well as our guest on House Bill 647. That's the bill from Representatives Plummer and Young, being also supported by Department of Children and Youth in response to the conversation around allegations of child care fraud. So there are some amendments moving on that bill. We'll do a recap in our newsletter this week, but I did want to shout out the Child Care Cred program. There's an expansion of the timeline to spend down those funds being amended into the bill, which is wonderful news. And there is a what I hope will be a fix considered by folks and would love to hear feedback to provide opportunities for families who need enrollment at two facilities to potentially have eligibility for two sites. So there's a process for that now for families to explore. So we've got that amendment language is on the website, and I'll put the link in the chat here shortly. And we'll keep tracking this bill. It could be voted out in the next couple weeks. We haven't gotten the committee notice yet for next week, but we'll share that in our newsletter too if it comes out before tomorrow morning. But I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get right to our guest, one of my friends that I was able to meet early in my groundwork tenure, Reverend John Jones. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I am so excited to hear what's new at Hope Toledo, and am so grateful to you for helping Groundwork grow our network of families, providers, and folks on the ground in the Northwest Ohio region. So thanks for being here. I'll pass it over to you, and we'll save a couple minutes at the end for questions. Good morning.
Sounds good. I hope everybody can hear me. Good morning to everybody. I'm really, really excited to be on the call. As Brittany's already shared, I have the wonderful opportunity to serve at Hope Toledo as its president and CEO, and have been in that role now for about 5, maybe 6 years, working on. So right around the pandemic timeframe was when we got everything started. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time in giving background. Folks can find out, who I am, what I do, all of that good stuff by looking online. What I will say, though, very quickly is that I know Elisa Huss-Hage is on this call. Elisa is one of our teammates here at Hope Toledo, and I'm not sure if we've got anybody else on from Hope Toledo. And for all the Northwest Ohio people who are out here and on this call, we just send a quick shout out to everybody that's here. And again, thank you all for joining. I'm going to try to share my screen real quick so we can get this ball moving and hopefully save a few minutes at the end for questions. And we did test this before, so it should pull up. I think
It's
you all
loading
can
up.
see that. There it is. And I'm going to click it to the show. There it is. I hope everybody can see that. So there's a couple things that we want to go through, and I'll give some background to our work and make sure that everybody has an understanding. And so just to level set the house, our mission at Hope Toledo is to support and ensure high quality education from birth to career. So in preschool, post-secondary, and trade school, our focus is every young person in the Toledo region in Northwest Ohio, creating generational economic change that hopefully and our goal is to better our families and our community. I try to put this up every time I talk and share is that these are our belief statements. And you will sort of get the idea of what we're focused on as we're doing this work. First and foremost, every single person, and I mean every person, regardless of background or any of the other things you see listed, should have access to affordable, high quality education near them. That is a crucial tenet. And I think the vast majority of you on this call will feel the same way. We also believe that a strong start in preschool makes the difference in the success of what children experience and their families experience later in life. We also believe, and I'll talk a little bit about this because we've sort of pivoted a little bit in our work, but it's still part of our belief statement because we have a handful of kids that are yet in our post-secondary space, but we believe students should have the opportunity to graduate debt free. Somebody say amen from a post-secondary program of their choice, right? And then the last thing is we believe a two-generational approach to post-secondary and to early childhood makes the difference. So how can we support both that student, that child, as well as their parents inside of the work that we do? So it's very critical. So I like the level set to really let people understand that is the work in the background of Hope Toledo. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Hope Toledo. I'm going to talk about the need that we saw here in Northwest Ohio and the achievements of the collaborative work that we've experienced so far. And then we're also going to explore, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the power of coalition building and how that motivates and should motivate our communities to continue advancing in the areas that they work in to experience the best success. So hopefully I hit all those learning objectives. I think everybody would agree with this statement. Hope education matters, right? And so when we think about this, and some of this is regular stuff for a whole lot of us on this call. So some of this may be a little bit preachy to the choir. Forgive me for it, but I think it's critically important that there is a continuum of educational investments. We know that you've got early investments, you've got investments during K-12, you've got post-secondary investments and investments towards career. So when we think about those investments and the return that we get on them, the earlier the investment, the greater the return. We all know that. We've seen it. We've heard it. And I think it's critically important, however, to keep saying it over and over again, particularly for not just for us in this room, but it is critical for us in this room so that we don't forget it. This is the reason why we do this work, because we believe that it's critically important to get investments into the education field earlier. So if we can get it at prenatal, that's educating the mom and doing all those different things and educating community. And then from a birth to three perspective, and then in preschool, and then you start to see that return on investment begin to wane as you go through K-12 and move towards post-secondary. Not that those investments aren't important, but the return on them just is not as great. And this is all research information. Many of you have heard of James Heckman. So that's critical. I do like to show this slide, not to be defeatist or to be a downer here this morning, but the reality is either we're going to pay now or we're going to pay later. If we invest now, and that's in the earliest stages of life, if we invest in the earliest stages of life, it prevents that pay later perspective. There are upwards to costs upward to $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 for juvenile detention. There are costs for maintaining an adult being incarcerated in our system in Ohio that ranges between $30,000 and $40,000. To invest in a child early could be as little as $10,000. Oftentimes it's more like 15 to 18, $20,000. That's the investment that we see. And if we invest early in those years, we know what that turns into: avoided incarceration costs. It increases lifetime earnings. And that can be shown through how much you earn when you work. That can be shown by the degrees that you can attain because you started early enough. But the return on the investment is significant. But the reality is that you're going to pay one way or the other. I always like to throw this slide in. This is a shout out to my friends at Groundwork. Investing in young children strengthens Ohio today and tomorrow, right? And so if we were to talk about all the dollars that go into this work, we know, and many of you have seen this, but I think it's worth saying it again, that if we aren't careful, the lost productivity, wages, taxes paid, all those different things, it is costing our state's economy a significant amount of money to the tune of $5 billion. And that is billion with a B, right? That is a significant amount of money. So when we're out talking about this, which is what I'll talk about later, but when we're out talking about this, it is critically important for us to talk about the economic impact. I am a warm and fuzzy guy. If you've been around me long enough, I love children. I love supporting our youth. I love doing the work of the community. If you haven't recognized yet or you haven't seen, yes, I am an ordained minister. I get to do this every single day of my life. So I love people. But I also am an accountant by trade. Finance and accounting is my degree. And at the end of the day, it is the money side of this house that helps us move this conversation forward. And it is a direct challenge to the investments that our state is trying to make when we don't invest in our kids early. So in Toledo, we recognize this. This is a quick data map that says, hey, there are about 4,000 to 5,000 kids, 4-year-olds particularly, in the Lucas County area. When we started looking at where those children were and how many of them had access, what you see on the screen, they're really little dots where we sort of position where our kids and where the concentration is. We also looked at in our needs assessment, we also looked at where was our KRA scores. These are KRA scores more recently, but when we first looked at the KRA scores, 18 I would say 16% to 18% of our kids were at the demonstrating level. Toledo Public School children at the demonstrating level on the KRA, which means over 80% of our kids were not at that level and not really ready to learn when they walked into kindergarten. You've seen a little bit of increase, not a whole lot from a district-wide perspective, but these are districts in Lucas County and how we look, and none of them are doing so excellent that we can pause and say, hey, we achieved in one of our districts, right? Our two best is Anthony Wayne, Ottawa Hills. They are a little bit more affluent areas, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the challenge to KRA is significant. I'd like to show this slide because this slide is a map of Toledo. The lighter the pink is where our KRA scores are higher, ranging anywhere between, and we're talking about demonstrating readiness, anywhere between 36% or 48% are there. The darker means the lower the KRA score. So if you see it, one would wonder in the area of pink, if I can hover here real quick, that's sort of downtown Toledo. One would say, well, that's a tough neighborhood. Why are the kids doing better? Well, we've positioned some high quality, really excellent with high capacity childcare centers in this area that is the lighter pink, right? So it's sort of urban core moving out. But when you move out beyond that, moving towards suburbs or beyond, you see those numbers start to get worse. One would think, well, why is that happening? Well, if you don't have, we talk about childcare deserts, if you don't have high quality childcare centers that are sitting in those spaces that have the capacity to serve. So we have high quality centers, but if they are full, where are the families going to go? And can they afford it? This is the reason why we overlap these two, looking at KRA, looking at that. And then when we started talking about what's our approach, this is where Hope Toledo started. This is another map of Toledo. You could almost overlap it, but it's another map of Toledo, and it shows you where our partners within the Hope Toledo work have been. So down here around where you see Toledo Day Nursery, Sandy Sandbox, Catholic Club, Promising Tomorrow, this is where that lighter pink was because we see a higher concentration of centers that are there. When you start to move out into northern parts of Toledo, into East Toledo down here, going farther to your west, so on and so forth, you see that those numbers in the previous slide, this one here, tells us that our KRA scores were a little bit lower. So what we did was said, hey, how can we identify those high quality centers might have some capacity issues, i.e. they're full. How can we help them add a little bit more resources, expand and create a classroom there so we can test out this model that is Hope Toledo? That was the brainchild. Here you see our partner providers and what they bring into the mix. We have the first year we did this work, which was the 21-22 school year. And I'll give you a little bit of history in a second. But the first year we did a full school year, we had 10 partner providers. We expanded that to 20. And so over the last 4 years, 4 school years, 21-22 to this last school year, 24-25, we worked with 20 different partner providers. We positioned a classroom in each one of their sites. They allowed us to do that and partnered with us. And then we funded seats for children inside of those spaces. What did we use as our basis? We said, hey, we all know what high quality looks like. Some people may argue that all may be a little bit much, John, but most people know what high quality looks like. But we said there are some key tenets to high quality. One, classroom size and ratio. Two, excellent teachers that are credentialed, skilled, all of those different things that are also compensated. I'm gonna get in trouble. This is being recorded, so y'all dub it out if you have to. Compensated at the right level, right? And we'll say out loud that our compensation model was not the absolute best, but it was better than what the averages we see inside of this work. Truthful statement, and I'll be very transparent here. When I first learned, I told y'all I'm an accountant by trade. I love education. I love children. But once I got into this work and started doing it, I was working at a health system. That was our origin story. Our mayor convened a whole group of people. We all came together, and I'll talk about that coalition in a second. We all came together. I was working for ProMedica, large health system. And in essence, this work came to me, right? So I can't say I went out and said, hey, I want to go learn how can I help childcare centers. Not that I'm not concerned about children and families and all those things, but the work came to us and we started doing the work. When I learned how much our teachers were being paid in early childhood, I about lost it, just keeping it real. Because it made no sense that on average, our teachers were being paid $12, $13 an hour on average. And we're talking about folks with degrees. We're talking about folks with credentials and skills and all of those different things. And I said to myself, how can our community expect to get the best if we're paying those who are serving in this space the worst? And so for me, this became a very real conversation, a very passionate conversation. So pay for teachers in the early childhood space was part of our model. We also looked at other quality supports, things like conscious discipline, things like ensuring that there was a community of learners. We have done and do class observations inside of those classrooms. That was part of our model. How do you engage parents and families inside of this work? That was part of our model in making sure that we did this effectively. So scooting on through, we had some affiliate providers that we added. And so those affiliate providers were not getting direct funding, but they were also a part of our community of learners. They got conscious discipline access, all those different things that we felt like were important. Here's some of the success stories that we've seen, and I'm hustling through this. We've put over $5 million of tuition credits for families into our community. We've served over 1,100 children. Our average tuition credit for families is about $6,200. And our KRA number on the demonstrating level for the families that were leaving a Hope classroom going into kindergarten, and compare this to what Toledo Public Schools, Washington Local, those KRAs, which are hovering around 16 to 17 to 18%. Our KRA scores for our kids is right around 30%. Now, is that perfect? Is that ideal? No, we need that number to be way higher. But for us to be taking children who have not been at that level and us to be serving them with the extra supports for these centers, we feel like that's a step in the right direction that supports the model. Let's talk a little bit about the coalition. Here was the advisory committee, and I just put the organizations that made this up. So everything from public school districts to our city, to our ESC, Family and Children First Council, the YW, the R&R that's there, our county, private industry from the chamber to our couple, a bank, PNC Bank, the Andersons, to our higher ed institutions, our local United Way. And we also included the All for Kids you see there, that was also including, right, our childcare centers, right? A couple of them sat on our advisory committee to help us develop and build this. We also developed a quality supports committee, which expanded the reach that we had. So you see still higher ed, school districts, board of DD was added. all these other things. We added parents to it. We added more childcare centers. We got state support team, GLCAP, which leads our Head Start space, as well as Toledo Public Schools. We also included our unions inside of this space. You see OACCP, all of those different things. We felt like that was important in building the coalition. So in my last couple minutes, um, and the post-secondary side of our work is important to us. We just have not had to do that as much here lately because we're transitioning that work because our kids are getting closer to graduation. But I do like to brag just a little bit. And I think we should because we've been both ends of the stick working. We have completed 62 scholars at this point, put over $3 million in scholarships out into the field. And what's really important to me is that our persistency rate of kids who are persisting through post-secondary is at about 58%. And I think that's critically important because at the end of the day, we're trying to develop young people so they can grow up and become those people who graduate from some type of post-secondary institution and go there. Let's talk about coalitions real quick. In my last couple minutes, it's 9:51. I'm gonna stop in about 2, 3 minutes so that you all have time to answer questions. But what is a coalition? I think everybody knows. I've heard the word and what it means, but to coalesce, which it says the act of coalescing, to coalesce literally means to bring together. And a coalition is a group of folks that have come together for a specific purpose. And I'm going to talk about coalitions for a few minutes because I think this is our frontier. This is the space that we have to master in this community if we're going to be successful at the state house, if we're going to be successful in our local governments, and if we're going to be successful serving children overall. We've got to develop phenomenal coalitions and get them going. So in essence, it's a strategic partnership of individuals, organizations, institutions that come together around, key word, a shared vision to solve a problem. None of them could solve effectively by themselves. So we all do great work. And in Toledo, Ohio, we have great providers of early learning and care. But there's no way any one of those partners that I have listed on those previous slides, there's no way any one of them could do this by themselves. The coalition recognizes that the problem is bigger than any one organization. So let's talk about the power of effective ones. One, it's expanded capacity. I can do more together, right? The old folks would say, I hang around old people all the time, and I say old folks respectfully. My elders are critical for me in my life. They would tell me all the time, John, if you use your hand, right, these fingers can do a little bit of work. But when you put a fist together, it strikes a much more powerful blow. And so, how do we expand our capacity and work collectively together? It also strengthens our legitimacy. When you think about the fact that, and I'll say this like I feel it, in this state and across this country, too many people discredit, devalue, delegitimize the work done in the early childhood field. Let me tell you why they do it. And this is just my personal perspective. Do have a little bit of history backing me up. They do it because the largest part of the field is populated by women, and it's often populated by women of color. And if you do the historical space, I don't want to get in trouble, step on toes, but if you look at the historical space, childcare in America is rooted in slavery. How were those individuals taking care of the quote unquote slave owner, plantation, their children? And that translated into the work that we now see. Too many people devalue the space. And when I got in and started looking at this, I am not one of those guys. I'm a proud son of a wonderful mother. I'm a proud grandson of a wonderful grandmother who taught me my first lessons. And I'm also a proud girl dad. I got three of my kids, four of my kids. All three are girls, one's a boy. Thank God I got a son. Happy about that. But I'm a proud girl dad. But we have to strengthen our legitimacy, and that happens through coalition building. Coalition building also, when it's effective, creates system level change. The changes we can make locally and inside of our centers and all that stuff, that's wonderful. But we need to see system level change. And if I can say it how I feel it, the systems have been built against us. And we have to work to change the system in order to see it. It also accelerates innovation. So when we see the phenomenal things happening in centers and you're working together in a coalition, you can learn from each other. so that we can do this work collectively together. And then it also increases our advocacy. And so the work done by Groundwork, the work done by Black Child Development Institute, the work done by Ohio Policy Committee, that group, when you look at all of these organizations and the work that they do, and then take it to your CCR&Rs, your OACCPs, you take it to all of the organizations that are existing, it can increase our collective advocacy. I think about the CEO Project, and I think about all of these organizations that are serving um, individuals that are working in this space, but they are also advocating at the state level and the local level, and it increases that. But there's also threats, and I'm almost done. There's threats to this. Mission drift is a threat. You start with a great purpose, and then the money pops up, and you start chasing the money, and you start doing this. That's a threat, and we must fight against that threat. Competition versus collaboration. If I can tell the truth, here locally, I'm grateful. When we first started this work, a group of child care center owners made a phone call and said, John, we need to have a conversation. And we went to a restaurant. I felt like I was being called into the principal's office. But what they said to me was, John, we've done this before. It's not against you, but what are you going to do different? How is this going to look different? How are we going to see success in this community? And we started building a real coalition that allowed us to increase trust. And the lack of trust threatens effective coalitions every single day. And if we aren't careful, that when there's an unclear governance structure, who's leading the charge? And it's also a challenge, not just unclear governance structure. You may have some folks in your communities, I'm saying this respectfully, who want to be the leaders, but the community may not want them to lead. And that could be a challenge there as well. So the governance structure has to be clear. And then finally, imbalanced participation. You've heard the whole 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the people do 80% of the work. We got to find a way to make sure that this work is equitably shared so that more people are able to get in and do it. So when you think about coalition building, Henry Ford said, or a couple other people said, coming together is beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. We've got to work together, and I think we can do it. If you want to go fast, it's an African proverb, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. That's what I'm encouraging us to do today. Individually, we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. That is significant, family. We can do this work. And then one of my favorites, which is Dr. King, who, if he were living, I'd make sure he was one of my mentors. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. This is not just for Ohio. This is for our nation. This is for our world. We see crazy stuff happening all over the place. And it is our opportunity to see real change and see it happen where we are. And so I'm just encouraging you, and I'm skipping through all of this. I'm encouraging you to take your time to reach out to your networks wherever they are inside of your community, build the coalition, ensure that you're doing that work. And I know you all are. Build the coalitions, have the conversations. Don't get worried about the levels of crazy that exist. We are better together. Last but not least, quick shout out to all my Toledo people who are on this call. Love y'all dearly. Thank y'all for supporting this work. Brittany, I'm done.
You want to be, but you're not. We've got questions. Thank you so much. And big love for all the Toledo folks. I went to Bowling Green, but Northwest Ohio is a very special spot in my heart.
Northwest Ohio in the house.
I know we're close on time, but we have a couple questions I
Shoot it.
definitely think we should go through. Eileen asks, have you seen some of the data specific to teacher retention, the wage conversation that you touched on? Can you share, do we have data showing that improving retention for
Yeah,
our
so
educators?
we have very limited data here in Toledo, but there is data at the national level, i.e., through organizations like NAYC and others that show us that when you can increase pay for teachers in the classroom, and pay means in compensation, right? So maybe it's benefits, maybe it's wage increase, all those different things. We have seen that that shows up in the retention side. Locally, we have seen it show up very clearly and directly when our providers are able to have been able to pay their teachers more. It has mattered because their teachers have stayed. And that is critically important inside of this work.
And one more, I'm going to riff a little bit. Todd asks about um, reducing the summer reading slide a little bit for older kids, professional development around literacy. If we could tie that, we've got some folks on the call who are intimately familiar with KRA, Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. But John, if you could talk a little bit about what kindergarten readiness looks like, and what we
Yeah.
want to see among those kids that we're trying to get to meet that gap.
100%. And let me say this being very candid. We use kindergarten readiness, and that's what's used across the state of Ohio. By no means is that the perfect metric. Let me be clear. By no means is that the perfect metric. But what it means is that those children, when they enter kindergarten, they are able to do your basics, right? Your numbers, your letters. They're able to spell their own name. They know their mom, their family's address. They are able to do some of the motor skill type things, tie their shoes, obviously use the restroom, do all those things on their own. But then there's a social emotional component to it and how they're able to do those things. Let me be real clear. When we talk about KRA, I hear that question about summer reading slide and those things. It's critically important that we not just focus on quote unquote kindergarten readiness only, because let's be clear. If I'm a kid, 4-year old, and I'm being taught for a year and I build a relationship with an educator in an early childhood center, and then I go to public school or any school in kindergarten and they do some type of a KRA assessment and I don't know that teacher, the odds are I may not perform, quote, perform, because that's what we're asking them to do. I may not perform as well. And so we got to be real careful again on the KRA's process, but there are some very key components inside of the KRA that are learning milestones that need to be addressed and need to ensure that we are accomplishing. And some of that is tied to how kids learn how to read and their ability to learn how to do that with the science of reading and all of those different things. Those are critical components. And that's how we can work better together. Here again, coalition between our early childhood space and our K to 12 space. How can we begin to infuse those things together so that when the child transitions, they're not walking into a totally new environment and didn't see any of that in preschool? And that's where we've got to have a better conversation of how those things work together. And I'm encouraging us to be able to reach out and do that. We've worked really hard to build relationships with our local school district, Toledo Public, Washington Local, so on and so forth, so we can begin some of those pre-K to kindergarten transitions. It's critically important that we have those.
Thank you so much. I know we're at time. Is there anybody who wanted to pop off mute while we have Reverend Jones in the house with us? Okay, I'm going to share. We will
Come
put
on.
out slides. Oh, yeah, I hear somebody.
That's Kim. I was trying to
Hi,
type
Kim.
fast, but couldn't. I just wanted to say what an inspiring morning with you, John. And I think Hope Toledo and Ohio are so fortunate to have you doing this work. Not only your passion for the work, but you can just hear your passion for the people, the children, the families, the educators that it's impacting. So you've started my day off well. Thank you.
Kim, that means a whole lot. We're trying to get this work done, right? And it's organizations like NAEYC, OAEYC, Southwest Ohio AEYC. It's organizations like that, right? That's all part of this coalition. And so I'm going to just say, last thing I'll say, and I know we got to go. Family, we can get this done. It seems like it's difficult. I feel it. I feel it every day. There's days I wake up. There's never a day I wake up that I'm not happy I woke up. I hope y'all got that. But when I wake up, I'm excited to go out and do this work because I'm a firm believer that if we do this collectively, we can create the change that we want to see in our communities, in our state, and yes, even in our world. Don't get weary. I'm a preacher. This is my last preachy moment. Don't get weary in well doing, because in due season, you will reap if you do not give up. So let's go get this work, y'all.
Thank you so much. We appreciate, I learn from you all the time, and I'm so grateful to you for being with us this morning. And we will share out all my team's clapping, just so you know.
Love y'all.
Have a great day, and we'll see you soon and get these slides out to everybody.
All right, everybody be safe out there.
Thank you.